I think Pierre Poilievre has hit rock bottom, you guys. Like, he is rage farming these days. That's how low it's gotten. Check this out. Pierre Poilievre posted this on Instagram yesterday. He reposted this article from the National Post. It is titled, Canada's new tariffs on US dropped to nearly zero with exemptions. Here's the caption under that post. Pierre Poilievre says, elbows up, McCartney told everyone. Yet in the middle of the 37-day election campaign, he quietly dropped retaliatory tariffs to nearly zero without telling anyone, knowing it would only become public after the election was over, May 7th. McCartney owes the Canadian people some answers now. So that was Pierre Poilievre's caption. The comment section on this post is interesting too. It is full of people who basically read the headline, read the caption, and now feel like they were gaslit by McCartney. The feeling is that McCartney ran on the promise that he'd be aggressive on Trump, and he is now seemingly backing down. He's capitulating by dropping these retaliatory tariffs. You know, I've actually said recently that Pierre Poilievre knows when to be classy. I take it back right now. Like, I said that in some videos on this channel, and BB, who is one of my most vocal subscribers, warned me about that. He warned me that Poilievre has no other setting but to sling mud. And I didn't take it from him. But, I mean, Poilievre said he is willing to work with the federal government in order to deliver for Canadians. But in the last few days, he has returned to rage farming and slinging mud. He has returned to the Pierre Poilievre that, frankly, turned a lot of voters off. The Poilievre that fumbled a 25-point lead in a very winnable election. The Poilievre that lost his own riding and is still living off taxpayers in Stornoway today. In this latest post, he is courting the ignorant a little bit. He is banking on the fact that people won't read the actual article he has referenced here. You'll read the headline, you'll read the caption, and that will be the story. You won't actually do your due diligence. That's what he's banking on. Now, let me actually read you the article that Pierre Poilievre is referencing there. It says, Canada has effectively suspended almost all its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products, tamping down inflation risks and improving its growth outlook, according to Oxford Economics. Now, I'll pause there for a second. That is actually a good thing. We don't want inflation risks. We don't want terrible growth outlook. We want the economy to grow. So if dropping retaliatory tariffs helps us stave off all these terrible consequences, I'm all for that, right? Anyways, let's proceed. The article goes on to say, the government imposed new export taxes of 25% on about $60 billion of US-made goods in March in response to the first round of tariffs from the Trump administration. Canada also retaliated against US auto tariffs in early April by putting its own levies on US vehicles. But Prime Minister McCartney's government then announced a 6-month tariff exemption for products used in Canadian manufacturing, processing, and food and beverage packaging, and for items related to healthcare, public safety, and national security. Automakers got a break too. Companies that manufacture in Canada, such as General Motors, are allowed to import some vehicles into Canada tariff-free. Those exemptions mean Canada's tariff rate increase on the United States is nearly zero, according to calculations by Oxford Economics. Here's a quote from Tony Stillo, Oxford's Director of Canada Economics. He says, quote, it is a very strategic approach from a new Prime Minister to really say we're not going to have a retaliation. It is a strategic play on the government's part to not damage the Canadian economy, end quote. So the article then goes on to say, retaliatory tariffs on some US goods remain, including on food items such as orange juice, alcohol, and coffee, as well as clothing and cosmetics. So this is a good part for me to jump in here and provide some context. Let's start with the timeline. So Pierre Poilievre is suggesting McCartney dropped the retaliatory tariffs during the election campaign and it just became public on May 7th after the federal election. Well, actually, the Toronto Sun, which happens to be a right-leaning media organization, they reported that Carney dropped most American tariffs the day after meeting Trump. Now, you might remember that McCartney met Trump on May 6th, one day before dropping these tariffs. So Poilievre is clearly trying to massage the timeline here to make it seem like there's some sort of deception going on. There's simply no evidence of that. But here's the other thing, right? What has McCartney actually done here? He dropped retaliatory tariffs on products used in Canadian manufacturing and food and beverage packaging, for example. Why is that a bad thing, right? If you know how tariffs work, you'll know that putting retaliatory tariffs on those things would mean higher prices for consumers here in Canada. Like, if you didn't drop these retaliatory tariffs, you might find that something as small as your 6-pack of beer might suddenly cost more. Do you know why? Because there are some cans used for beer here in Canada that are gotten either from the United States or China. And that's just one example. What McCartney said he'll do on the campaign trail is ensure that any retaliatory tariffs cause minimum impact here in Canada and maximum impact in the United States. I mean, in what universe does it make sense to punish yourself just to show that you're a tough guy? Here's the other thing nobody will tell you, certainly not Poilievre. Trump has actually created several tariff exemptions for CUSMA compliant goods. We do not have any reciprocal tariffs as well. Like, as far as I know, McCartney did not drop our 25% retaliatory tariffs on American vehicles. He just gave them an incentive to manufacture here in Canada. They get to import some cars tariff-free if they make some cars here. Simple as. Anyways, I'll finish reading the article because it goes on to explain why this is probably a smart idea to drop these retaliatory tariffs now. So the article says, Carney fought and won an election last month by convincing millions of Canadian voters that he was the best candidate to handle a trade war with the US, which buys about 3/4 of Canada's exports. The Prime Minister said Canada will have to strengthen its own domestic economy, partly through government-backed infrastructure and housing initiatives, and seek out new trade and security alliances with other countries. But he's also made it clear that he doesn't necessarily endorse dollar-for-dollar retaliation, which former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he supported in principle. Oxford still sees the Canadian economy slipping into recession this year, but it upgraded its growth forecast to 0.9% for this year and 0.3% next year. Government spending should soften the blow of the trade war, the firm said. It is forecasting that the rate of inflation will briefly rise to 3% in 2026, but should ease quickly. And that's the end of the article. But that last part is very important. The forecast with this trajectory is that Canada will fall into a recession in 2025. The US is also looking at the possibility of a recession as well, so it's not just us. So the task in front of McCartney is to soften the impact of a possible recession on Canadians if it cannot be averted. Now here's the other thing. I think people have lost the plot a little bit. Like, we cannot win a trade war with the United States. We don't have the size. We don't have the macroeconomics to fight it out with the US. What we want to do is come to a point where there are no tariffs on our industries. The goal is not to fight it out with the US, right? The goal is to come to an agreement and build this country. But that's not the message Pierre Poilievre wants you to come away with. He wants you angry. When you're angry, you're not paying attention. You're easily manipulated that way. To be honest, this isn't even the only thing he's done this week that I find a little questionable. I have some more breakdowns coming for you guys, so stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, just down below. This is the thing with Pierre Poilievre, right? The man was humble for 1 week after the election, and now he's back to slinging money again. He has not even won his by-election yet. Anyways, I wanted to keep this one short. I'll see you guys next time. Subscribe if you haven't already, just down below. Take care.